Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So, today we are going to talk about a mindset that is becoming more common among a certain subset of people. And we're going to kind of dive into it a little bit because it kind of shows how a superficial understanding of something may lead people to develop opinions that are contradictory to the opinion that they say they hold, to a belief that they believe to be right and good and true. So we're going to talk a little bit more about India and their foreign policy decisions. In a recent video, I talked about how India is getting ready to step into a new role. They're going to become a much more powerful nation. And part of that role is basically checking China in a way. There were a number of people who didn't like that for various reasons, but we're going to talk about one particular reason that people didn't like it, and there were some very colorful comments about this in the comments section under that video. And then a couple of people sent messages expressing the same idea, the same take. And that take is that India's doing it wrong. They're messing up. They shouldn't be trying to check China. They should be leaning in and becoming more friendly with them because of the United Kingdom's actions during colonialism. Okay, that is a wild take, and we'll get to why it's, in some ways kind of absurd. But first, I do want to point out that India and China went to war in 1962, and they have had skirmishes and standoffs on a pretty frequent basis, the most recent of which was in 2021. It's super hard to become aligned with a country that you are actively hostile towards at times. But setting aside the actual foreign policy considerations that would need to be taken into consideration, I want to talk about the mindset and the attitude that led to these statements, because the general tone is, hey, I understand the Indian experience under colonialism better than Indians. And because of that, I can tell them how to pursue their national interests in a better way. Ugh, that's bad. If you truly believe that's the case, your only option, you kind of have a duty or a responsibility to call the Indian embassy and explain to them that you, as a white man living in the United States, understand their situation better than them, and that you are happy to volunteer to save the Indians from themselves and teach them how to interact with the rest of the world in a civilized manner. It's gross, isn't it? That's a horrible thing. It comes from a superficial understanding of foreign policy and a reliance on wanting things to remain the way they were, and not understanding that a lot of countries are going to come into their own, and they don't want to bend their knee to China. India, it's not becoming a country that's going to be under the thumb of some other nation. This is a nuclear power that is going to start operating multiple carrier groups. There are countries in NATO that don't have a single carrier group. They are going to become a pretty powerful country, way more than they are now. There are some people who are you're kind of downplaying how much they force project using soft power. Yeah, that's valid. I did. because this was more focused on the military aspects of it, because now they're going to have the carrot and the stick, so to speak. This attitude of wanting countries that, for whatever reason, the person views as lesser, to bow to a country that has historically been a major power, that leads to colonialism. It leads to imperialism. It leads to spheres of influence and all of that stuff. And it's a take we're seeing more and more frequently. We see the same thing with Ukraine. You see that moment where they're like, well, Ukraine is part of Russia's sphere of influence. That is a colonial mindset. That is an imperialist mindset. Ukraine is a country. They're allowed to do as they want. Ukrainians and Indians get to determine their own foreign policy. And saying that they're making this drastic error because of colonialism, something that they experienced, that's wild. This isn't saying, hey, maybe you should focus on getting your oil from a different source because it would be better for these like normal foreign policy reasons. This is literally saying you don't understand your own history. You don't understand it. You don't know because you're a lesser power made up by lesser people, is the subtext. And they need a white guy to come in and tell them how to do things, because historically white guys came in and told them how to do things. This is horrible. When you actually analyze the take, it's a defense of colonialism. It's the same mindset. I've met people from India. They seem pretty smart. I bet they can run their own country. I'm willing to bet that their foreign policy experts are pretty good. I mean, they have gone from a country that just became a country out of colonialism, and now they're a nuclear power prepared to run multiple carrier groups. When this is up and running, they're in the top 5 as far as carriers. And that may be part of it too, because most people who watch this are Americans, and we have what? We have 11 real carriers, real big carriers, and then like 9 carriers for helicopters. Most countries don't have one. The U.S. has a bunch. The U.S. has more than most countries that have them, actually, like together. There are a whole lot of powerful nations, major players on the international stage that don't have 2 carrier groups. They're moving into a higher stakes table. The level of advance that they've had and how far they've come suggests that maybe they don't need your advice. Maybe they're looking out for their own interests rather than being subservient to the country you want them to be subservient to. And then there were a couple of comments as far as like, well, their defense industry really isn't up to this yet, and all of that stuff. And a lot of that is true. But I want to point out that in almost all of those comments, the word yet is there. If you are somebody who has foreign policy takes where you're looking years into the future, don't sleep on India. They are moving forward way faster than I think a lot of people are ready for. And I think once they really start force projecting, I think there are a lot of people who are going to be surprised. So, anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.